Very brisk evening here with northerly winds in our part of Texas here. Much of the central U.S. getting north and northwest winds and very cool weather. Let's take a look at the charts here and see what's going on. And this is showing the theta analysis. This is kind of like the temperature reduced to a common level, so it negates the effects of different elevations. And pretty obvious where we have a front, roughly from Ohio down to about Nashville and down to about Louisiana. And along that front, we've got some showers out there. This is the New Orleans radar. You can see a little bit of outflow on some of these storms here. A lot of these are very disorganized. They're outflow dominant. And I don't see much in the way of watches or warnings on any of these. Lake Charles radar showing kind of a similar picture. They are starting to pick up a little bit of that moisture coming up off the Gulf. But the front went through Texas pretty dry last night. Out in the western U.S., let's take a look out that way. Yeah, there we go. You can see the eastern side of the front banked up in the Rockies right there. Coldest air located from Iowa down to about Oklahoma and DFW. So the shallowest air forming kind of an east or a western boundary right there. And then out in this region, looks like we still have a little bit of northerly flow across the Great Basin. So kind of a cool high settling in this time of year. Pretty common around October going into November there. And looks like possibly a new reinforcement of cool air coming in from the north across Oregon right there. This is the thickness and isobars showing what's pretty obviously the front all the way down to the Gulf and banked up into the mountains of Mexico and eastern, or actually western Colorado right there. Another outbreak of cool air, very, very light, possibly across Oregon right there. We'll have to look at the charts and see if that's actually the case there, but the core of the polar air right there over Minnesota. Pretty mild out in the eastern U.S., and looks like we have a warm front from upstate New York out to about Massachusetts, from about Boston there, back through around north of Toronto, to probably a triple point right north of Detroit, probably around, my Michigan geography is not that great. I'm trying to remember the name of a town. It's near Sarnia, Ontario right there. That's where the triple point is. And then north of that, we've got an occlusion going all the way back to northern Wisconsin, and around that, pretty good wraparound low. All right, let's go region by region and see what's happening. Pretty quiet in the northwestern U.S. This is going to be the current chart here, and looks like a little bit of a pressure gradient from north to south. So this is probably supporting that little push of cooler air coming south into the Oregon deserts there. In the southwestern U.S., there we go. This evening, there we go, northerly winds, north winds there at Vegas. That's a good sign that we've got cool polar air filtering in. And the eastern deserts, the Mojave Desert around Edwards, Barstow, Daggett, also seeing a little bit of northeasterly flow there. So it's a very light Santa Ana type pattern, but not enough to really kick up the winds in the coastal areas. 88 degrees there around Phoenix, so yeah, it is still a little bit warm in that region. Across the central U.S., there's tonight's weather. High pressure across South Dakota right there, so plenty of cold air advection coming into Minnesota and Iowa. A lot of sub-freezing temperatures there. But on the western periphery, we've got what's kind of like the return flow. And there's a little bit of a downslope component coming off the Rockies there. So temperatures warming up a little bit to the 30s and lower 40s. Then the picture down in Texas this evening. Front located from about Nashville down through about Jackson and down towards Lafayette and then offshore. Very gusty winds offshore in that large area where they have the drilling rigs offshore. But north of that, cool air, lots of 40s and 50s, and we're coming down to about 47 where I'm at right here. Lots of 30s in Oklahoma and Kansas. Then when we head out to the eastern U.S., still pretty warm. There's the current chart right there. Lots of 60s and 70s. Looks like it has cooled a little bit now that we're starting to get into the cold season. So we go from about 71 there at Miami down to 67 at Jacksonville and a pleasant 64 there at Atlanta. And then we head up to the northeastern U.S. and this evening map is kind of looking like that. We know the triple point is around Sarnia, so right around this area here. South of that, cold front. And then to the east of that, warm front, pretty much right like that there. So you can see 60 degrees there at around Rochester, 56 in Buffalo, 55 down to Erie. And then north of that, that's where the cool air is located up there in Quebec. So for the most part, a pretty quiet pattern right now, except for the showers and thunderstorms in the southeastern U.S. And as you can see, we are the cold spot around the world. Most of the planet right now looking at a lot of above normal temperatures and slightly below normal temperatures. Even Siberia, northern Russia, only going about 5 to 10 degrees Celsius below normal. And central U.S., much colder, looking at about 15 to 20 Celsius degrees below normal. Looks like it is warming up there in Western Canada, though. They're running about 10 degrees above normal today. So here's a look at the polar orbiter data from earlier today. Cold front pushing basically through the eastern or through the Mississippi River region, pretty dry. Let me try the other satellite. See if that looks a little bit different there. You can see something looks wrong here. Is this correct? 27th. Yeah, I expected to find the system here a little bit further to the east over the Great Lakes, but maybe it's moving eastward at a pretty good clip. That's about all I can figure there. But at the bottom it does say October 27th. But we are starting to develop that snowpack there in the northwestern U.S. And above that, actually it looks like a lot of that is actually cumulus cloud. A lot of unstable conditions there in the northwest. So we're going to be looking for an upper level low or some very cold temperatures aloft in that area. Yeah, it looks like we don't pick up the snow-covered mountains until we get up to British Columbia there. Let me take a look here at the settings. I just want to be 100% sure we're looking at current data. Okay, yeah, that's what the chart looked like yesterday. So the Rockies, lots of snow in the higher elevations all the way down to the Tetons and central Rockies. Looks like Colorado looking pretty dry this time of year. And then for the 27th, yeah, something was going on. Something was screwy with the website here. This is actually the current data, so things look a little bit different here. This is more over the Great Lakes, like I was expecting. Yeah, I think they had a bug there in their website. So this is actually what's current there. So there's the surface system, and the front coming down into Texas, and then the warm front like that. But still, yeah, it is pretty dry in the northern Rockies there, and hardly any snow cover in Colorado right now. Pretty dry and barren. And I would expect at least there to be a little bit in Nevada there, because those are some very cold high desert and the mountain ranges. Those are usually going to retain quite a bit of snowfall earlier in the year. That's weird, but it's getting kind of a purple color on the Great Salt Lake up here. I wonder what's causing that. Anyway, tropics pretty quiet except for a depression just north of Honduras. Potential tropical cyclone 18, 35 knots gusting to 40, moving north-northwest. So we're looking for that to head out over Florida, at least around the Florida Keys on Sunday. Okay, the upper level conditions showing low pressure over Minnesota. So we've still got northwesterly flow in effect. The main upper level trough over the Great Plains like that. And as that passes, we'll start getting some of the much cooler air coming into Texas and Oklahoma. And then probably a warming trend as that ridge starts building in. All right, so we'll go ahead and take a look at the infrared imagery. Okay, so I just pulled this up and I selected an enhancement scheme that shows some of the cold ground temperatures. What you're seeing here is kind of a mixture of both low and mid cloud with some high cloud, and also the cold ground temperatures where there's no movement, like right through here in the Dakotas and Nebraska. That's all very, very cold temperatures at the ground there. And then this edge right here, that's probably the back edge of this low cloud wrapping around the surface system. So we'll take a quick look at the surface chart right there and see how cold it is. 30s in Nebraska. And probably about the coldest temperature I can find right now is about 27 around Grand Forks. Right there. Right where Fred Reamer, I don't know if Fred's on, but that is where they're getting the brunt of that cold air. And then along the leading edge of the front, where we have the showers and thunderstorms, doesn't look very cellular. The convective elements looked very mushed up and close together. Don't see any distinct storms along the length of that line. So that's a good sign that this, for the most part, is non-severe. You can see a pretty huge contrast there in the temperature in the western U.S. The purple deserts there, 70s and 80s and a few 90s, and contrasting sharply with the cooler temperatures in the high desert and northeast of the Mogollon Rim right there. And very cold there around El Paso. This is kind of interesting because usually the front range forms a barrier for these cold air masses, and it looks like the cold air is kind of crossed over the mountains and it's kind of backed up against the Mogollon Rim and the mountains around Silver City, around Lordsburg, New Mexico, down to the panhandle right there of New Mexico. So let me check that out on the surface chart, see if we can find any evidence of a boundary. And we do see that the temperatures are pretty cool there in New Mexico, upper 50s and lower 60s, contrasting sharply with the 80s and 90s there in Tucson and Phoenix. So yeah, I think we're probably looking at kind of a back edge to that front back through here. So let me go ahead and plot the theta. That's not quite coarse enough to really pull out the detail in the field, so I'm going to bring this smoothing down a little bit. Plot that one more time. And yeah, I guess we're probably seeing a little bit of the gradient right there along the front in southern New Mexico right there. And then it looks like up to the north there we pick up a new boundary. I think that boundary is probably something like this right here. So those are some features we would look for when we're doing our analysis, and that's the boundary I was talking about right there in Utah. You can see we're contrasting 74 there, Tonopah, which is in the high desert, 79 there around whatever that is south of Cedar City, and then we go north of there and we're down to the 50s in Utah. So that could be a boundary that could be significant if we had any upper air support working over the area. Okay, so let me take a look at the chat real quick and see who we got tonight. Got Kevin McKinney there and Megan John, snowing in 34 in Minnesota. 49 degrees there at Killeen from Alexi. Megan John got their 2017 winter weather workshop and got to meet the director of SPC. David Moore saying a lot of buffering on his end during the intro. Sue M. there, joining us from soggy and cold Indiana. Alexi was seeing some buffering too. Hopefully that buffering has kind of died down a little bit. Got Ryan Toomey's here and Dwayne Ward. Ryan Toomey's looking for that tropical storm moving through Florida. Boat show is going to take a hit this weekend. Yeah, it seems like late October is kind of a risky time to schedule a boat show, since that's around the tail end of tropical storm season. Carl Berghoff joining us from snowy northern Wisconsin. Dwayne Ward, 52 degrees there in the Delmarva. Intrigued about the quite complex forecast for the East Coast. Carl says it's way too windy, getting sandblasted. Trying to get outside, 30 to 40 mile an hour winds. Veo Joe saying they've got 42 degrees there at UIN. I think that's Quincy, Illinois. 35 degrees on the Davis station there. Carl Berghoff has 4 to 5 inches so far. Fire danger critical in the western U.S. from Ryan. Veo Joe mentioning the pressure Wednesday was 29.97. 29.97 is a little bit above normal, but 990 hectopascals, that is below normal. Not excessively below normal, but that is low. That's probably in the 29-inch range. Carl Berghoff has a snowplow there. And just going quickly through the rest of the messages. Dan Hammond joining us from Kentucky. Veo Joe, or Ron Chalfant there. Nice fall day in Southern California. And Dane Hammond, 43 degrees and rainy in Covington, Kentucky. And Misty Sowards, do you think we'll see a tornado outbreak in the south in November? There's no way to know, but climatologically, we do expect severe weather episodes, usually at least once a year, somewhere in the southern U.S., especially in this region right there. A hot spot for November is actually around Memphis, around Jackson, Mississippi, up to Huntsville, and possibly back to Shreveport. There's kind of a max of severe weather that moves into that region around fall. And then towards December and January, it kind of settles in close to the Gulf Coast. And then by the time March rolls around, it starts moving back to the north once again, more towards the plains. Okay, we'll head into the forecast now. I have to get resume work on the book, but here's the upper level patterns. 500 millibars showing a new wave coming south. So there's the current picture. Low heights aloft over Wisconsin right there, so kind of a cold core system. Showery precip there, rain showers and snow showers. And then behind it, the northerly flow and cold air advection coming back in behind. And then you can see the next wave about to work south. There it is. Big trough coming southward on Sunday. And that's going to support the next outbreak of cool air, because the air out ahead of it tends to have upward vertical motion, and we get height, or we get pressure falls with that at the surface. So this area right here is a very good location for cyclogenesis, and we would expect to see a front possibly like that at the surface. So this is on Sunday. We're going to be looking for another cold outbreak coming south later this weekend. There it is heading south, and that'll be coming into the Midwest around Monday and Tuesday. So we'll put it together and look at it on the surface chart. Starting out for tonight, there's the current picture, and we've gone all over that. Barotropic low over Wisconsin right there, and there's a low aloft almost directly over the top of it, and around the other side, the north side, wraparound. And that a lot of that wraparound will die off during the night. And then by tomorrow, for later Saturday, that system moves up into Quebec. There's the front, kind of trailing off towards Toronto. And then it looks like another segment of the front stretches all the way into Georgia and offshore like that. So probably a few showers along the front tomorrow evening around Alabama, eastern Tennessee, around Atlanta. And then we've got that tropical system coming in through Florida right there, just off to the bottom of the chart. For Sunday, our attention shifts up to the north. And there's that next system right there, low pressure over Manitoba, leading edge of the front right there through the Dakotas, and then probably a warm front like that. In the north of that, we would have an occlusion. So this is the next outbreak of cold air right there. Elsewhere, that system over Florida moves up the coast and really starts coming together around the Carolinas during the day on Sunday. And with the warm Gulf Stream waters and a little bit of upper level lift with these troughs rotating around the upper level system, that's some good support for development there around Virginia. And you can see things really come together there over Long Island, Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, all of that looking for some potent weather. Kind of like a, because looking at how fast this comes together, this reminds me a little bit of that, I'm trying to remember that name that they made a movie, The Perfect Storm. It's probably not quite that severe, but this is a very similar genesis to that kind of storm. These waters out here are very potent for development, especially early in the cold season. And then by, as you can see here, by Sunday night, 982 millibar low over New York. So how many inches is that? 982 divided by 33.8636, good number to have in your head, and that gives us a barometer reading of 28.99. So yeah, that's a pretty deep system there. And then behind that, here comes the next Alberta clipper on its way south. It's going to be kind of a reinforcing shot. System moves up into the Maritimes and the occlusion up into Quebec. Now we have a 968 millibar low, so even deeper there. And then here comes the next outbreak, surging into the southern plains on Monday into Tuesday. So we're going to get cold again, and you can see some precip developing across Texas right there, and the reason is pretty obvious. Looks like the front is something like that right there, but if you look off into the tropical air off the coast, you can see that there's the southeasterly gradient. And aloft over the cold front surface, it continues moving over the top of that cold air. And we get that lift. It acts kind of as a wedge. And if it's sufficiently humid, we will get development of rain, drizzle, and even a few showers and thunderstorms, depending on what things are like aloft. And if we have an upper-level system sitting out over the southwestern U.S., that's especially potent because that will pull most of the low-level and mid-level flow eastward, kind of producing an upslope flow type pattern, and that goes right over the cold dome and produces a lot of precip. And if it's cold enough, that can be a huge way that Texas and Oklahoma gets winter weather. Another system coming together up there Wednesday in Alberta. So the Arctic Express keeps continuing, and there's the next front right there moving into the Midwest. A lot of activity there. There's the leading edge of that next system, 1040 millibar high over Saskatchewan and Manitoba, but not moving very fast because there's a lot of pressure falls out in the western U.S., things becoming very stormy in that area. And when that happens, the large-scale flow becomes counterclockwise like that. So if any cold air is trying to move quickly southward, that's being checked by this rotating flow around the stormy weather out west. So not much movement just yet on this high. So our attention shifts out to the west, and there's our next system there coming through Nevada and Utah. Could be a bit of a snowstorm there next weekend. And there it goes, moving into the Great Lakes area around the 6th and 7th. And more cold air coming south, but it looks like it's getting stormy out west once again. So once again, we have another system coming together out west. And now things are looking pretty quiet out west, and I think we're done with things stalling the advance of the polar air. And finally, by the 11th, looks like we get a good shot of this 1035 millibar high coming south. And that gets to the end of the run there. So that's about all that we know. Now, as far as severe weather, that is possible. And what I was looking at is possibly something over the weekend in Georgia, the Carolinas, out in this area, along that front. Pretty good cold pool there over Tennessee. This is on Sunday midday. So yeah, very, very cold air there combining with the very warm air offshore. That's a very, very potent area. So we'll keep an eye on that for tomorrow and try to cover that then. And then what I was looking at is the return flow coming up after that for Monday and Tuesday. You can see the Gulf is open once again. And then I'm thinking possibly Halloween, maybe some severe weather in Texas. Yeah, there's some storms popping up there at midnight. And the Gulf is open in Louisiana and Mississippi, so possibly once again during the day on Wednesday. And then after that, it's a little bit more indeterminate. So anyway, we've got a lot to look at over the next week, and I think that'll probably do it for today's show. Let me take one more look at the chat. A little discussion on there about weather stations. Yeah, I've got a weather station here myself. I've got an old Davis weather monitor, but during my last move, there's like a splitter that joins the rain gauge, the anemometer, and the temperature probe into one connection. They're like these phone plugs, and it joins it up and plugs it up in the station. Well, that box got lost, and Davis doesn't have they don't have a replacement, so I guess they're trying to push their newer instruments and get rid of the old stuff. So my station isn't working right now, but maybe I'll find that part one day. And let's see. Okay, that's probably going to be about it for now. I've got to get back to my book, so I'll go ahead and close things up. Hopefully y'all have a good evening there, and we'll see what happens with the system coming up into the eastern U.S., so that does promise to look interesting. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and hopefully we will see you tomorrow.